feel that this is an uneventful time of year. We've got to wait now. It used to be the Feast of Transfiguration in August, but they've changed that now. So we've got to wait until November for All Saints. There are Saints' Days, Saints' Sundays, but we Methodists aren't very good, are we, at celebrating those. So in November we've got All Saints, we've got Remembrance Sunday, and then it's coming up to Advent. But I feel that that the readings for this Sunday, last Sunday, next Sunday, Stuart referred to last Sunday's, the sort of farming readings really. Last Sunday it was the parable of the sower. This Sunday it is the parable of the weeds. Next Sunday of the three, it begins with the seed. What sort of seed is it? Anyway, the seed that grows. I feel that they are sort of suitable for this time of year. They're summer readings, really, because this time of year is a time of growth. When we go out into the country, some of us go walking, some of us don't walk, but when we go out into the country, we see the fields with the wheat or oats or barley crops. There's even a field on the way to Crompton with that. We go into our gardens, where of course we have to cope with the weeds. But we there are aware of growth. A lot of people these days, of course, also, as well as flowers, grow vegetables. So that we do think about growth in the summertime, and a lot of that is what these parables are about. Of course, I said going out into the garden, we're involved very often in weeds. And I was interested that the readings that we had today were thistles. Of course, in the old version, it refers to them as tares. In one of the other versions, it's darnel, but there we are. They're weeds. I feel that I'm not really serious enough when it comes to coping with my weeds. I was very pleased to hear one of the television gardeners not very long ago said it's important to have some nettles in your garden because the butterflies like nettles. When it comes to the front grass, I like the clover and the daisies, and especially the yellow goat's beard. So I get quite upset when the gardener comes and takes them down. But our parable is about weeds, and it is something where we've got to take the idea of weeds seriously, because the weeds in that parable represent the evil in the world. The evil which Jesus says cannot be pulled out as we go, just in the way that you can't weed a field of wheat. You find yourself pulling the wheat up. But that God will destroy it at the end of time. There certainly is an awful lot of evil in the world, isn't there? I mean, even in our sort of civilized society, you keep hearing about crime. Much of the news in the newspapers and on the television is about crime. You get really respectable people committing the sort of crimes that some of the MPs fiddling their accounts and therefore making illegally, dishonestly making money. We've had, the news of course has been dominated lately, hasn't it, by this hacking business. And there again you get respected, not sort of poverty-stricken, desperate people, but respected and respectable people are doing this disgraceful thing of hacking into telephones. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, telephones. And you get it also. It reflects on the people who read the newspapers, because there again, obviously, they are pleased to hear particularly secret and shameful things, or pleased to read even sad things, when you think about Gordon Brown's. It's partly the readers and their sins, as it were, that are responsible for that. So really, human beings, as we know, are basically sinful. And you get the same thing in the animal kingdom, don't you? We sing all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small. But behind the scenes, it's not so bright and beautiful often. You get all sorts of awful things going on. You can't blame the animals because they've got to eat, which is why they pursue one another. And you get these birds of prey pulling little teeny birds out of their nests and so on, awful things going on. And so I think it's interesting that when Isaiah wants to represent how marvellous it's going to be when God establishes his kingdom on earth, he represents it in terms of animals. That the lion will lie down with the lamb. And you've got a lovely picture of that, haven't you, in there, that you always put it up at Christmas time, the picture of a lion lying down with a lamb. So very, very different from the actual facts. But it's our hope for the future of the world. When I was thinking about this, suddenly, and particularly thinking about that question that the servants asked the master, you have sown good seed, well, how is it that you've got weeds coming up? And the words came to me in that old version, from whence then hath it tares. That, of course, came to me, I suppose, because I was brought up on the old version of the Bible. So let's make that our sort of the title of our next bit of thought. Whence then hath it tares? Whence has it weeds? Where does the evil in the world come from? Since we believe that God was the creator of this world. Well, of course, we have the story of the fall, don't we? At the very beginning of the book of Genesis, the very beginning, just after creation. So there wasn't much of the Garden of Eden. There we have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and then Eve falls for the temptation of eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God has forbidden them to Eve is tempted by the snake. Again, we have that sort of summing up of the... Oh, you've got a drink. I've got a drink here. Got one, actually. But you feel that even if the snake hadn't been there, Eve was tempted, because we're told that she felt that this tree, which they were forbidden to touch, this tree was so beautiful, and that she wanted the wisdom which would come if she ate the fruit and therefore had the knowledge of good and evil. But according to the biblical story of the fall, that disobedience to God's will drives them out of the Garden of Eden. And in no time at all, you do get stories of the most appalling crimes. You have Cain murdering Abel, his brother. You have the world so full of evil at the time of the flood that God decides that he'll destroy it and start again, a new start with Noah and his people. And I think we can feel, can't we, somehow, that sin is built into us in the sense that we put ourselves, we've got to look after ourselves. We've got to put ourselves first. We've got to, in a sense, in order to survive, come on, we've got to be selfish. That is our survival kit, as it were, as human beings, and yet that's something that we've got to fight against all the time. The point that Jesus was making, of course, was that evil is bound to be part of the world until it all ends, and then God will destroy evil and we'll be back to paradise. But what isn't in the parable, of course, and parables only make one point. There's one of the scholars, I think, that has written a book about this, that parables only make one point. But what part has Jesus himself in all this? We believe that Jesus came to us, the Son of God, came to earth because of sin, to deal with sin, as it were. He did it by his life and his teaching, by showing how we could live a life without sin, a life of humility, a life of love and service to our fellow human beings. And he also, of course, by his death, we believe that he paid the price of sin, as it were. He secured our forgiveness. And in our last hymn, it's all right, we're going to have a pause. In our last hymn, which is "May the mind of Christ our Saviour dwell in us from day to day," we do pray that in our lives from day to day we may follow Jesus, in that we have in our minds and in our hearts that love, that service that there was in the life of Jesus.